works with blockchain or decentralized Web3 kind of projects. We also do live events. This is our 65th event? 66th event. So it's been pretty crazy and it's been an awesome ride, and so hit us up. It's me and John and do we have anyone else here? Matt Quinn, where's he? Okay. Is he there? No? Okay, so the tall guy with the curly hair. Yeah, okay, I think that's it. Thank you guys.
All right, hello everyone. How are y'all doing? Good. All right, so everyone's excited for the Ripple meetup, right? Yeah. Oh shit, sorry. Oh, it's a Zcash meetup. That's what it was. Great. So we're all really excited to be here tonight. Obviously, you know that we have a very special guest, actually a couple special guests, which is pretty cool. Who here does not know what Monero is or have a decent understanding of Monero? Okay, good. If you don't, if you go to our meetup, the last month, we did an intro to Monero. So if you want to understand how Monero achieves its privacy, the different technologies we use, if you want to understand what fungibility is, how that works, feel free to check out that video from last month's meetup. If you have any questions about basics, feel free to hit me up afterwards as well. I'm more than happy to explain that to you. I want to first give a quick plug, so thank you so much to Starfish. They've been awesome to host us here the last couple months. They do a lot of cool stuff on Saturdays. They have a reading club for various white papers, Ethereum, Lightning, all sorts of cool stuff. I also want to give a plug to Tari Labs. There's a few Tari Labs folks in the crowd tonight. If you're here, maybe raise your hand so folks can meet you afterwards. Tari Labs, you'll hear more about, I'm sure, later. They're building a digital assets, I should say I work with Tari Labs as well, a digital assets protocol on top of Monero. So anything non-fungible tokens, in video game items, it could be concert tickets, those sorts of things. And a special shout out to them because the pizza and the beer was provided by Tari Labs. Which is cool. So if you have any questions about Tari or what we're working on, feel free to come find me or anyone who raised their hands afterwards. And with that, I'm very pleased to announce our special guest tonight, a man who needs no introduction, the myth, the legend, the pony himself. Give it up, y'all. Ricardo Spagni, the lead developer.
Hey everyone. Hello. Welcome to the Monero Masterclass. I'm going to try to keep it under 4 hours. So I was going to give a talk, but I'm still significantly jet lagged and I've been in Vegas for 4 days, so that's not happening. So I figured what we could do is a little bit, I think what I'd like to talk about is just some of the stuff that happened at DEF CON, which is pretty interesting, and some of the things that we've been doing recently, and then have Q&A. So some of the things that have been happening recently that's been kind of interesting is I spent a few days in Panama speaking to regulators and having some really interesting meetings. Panama, as you no doubt know, was for a very long time a place that you could go to if you wanted sort of banking secrecy and you wanted to hide stuff in shell companies, and all your proceeds from your drug deals needed to be stored somewhere, and they were happy to take you in until the Panama Papers was published, and then that was, well, not so great for them, because now the eyes of the world are on them, and they've had to change a lot of the ways that they do things. And they're still an offshore hub in a way, but they're desperate, they're worried, because they see the bottom falling out from underneath it, and they don't really know how to fix that. And in the meetings that I had with the Banking Council and the Banking Alliance and so on, one of the things that was repeated over and over again is that they think that cryptocurrency, and Monero in particular, is the new offshore. And they honestly see that by and large, there are existing customers that are just saying to them, I want my money out. I want to move my money into Bitcoin, into Monero. And that is, I think, for them as a currency or as a country rather, that has relied on that activity for so long, they're frightened. And I think that the upshot of that from my perspective is, I think it's a bit of a pat on the back for everything that we've built with Bitcoin and subsequently with Monero, or sort of on the side of Monero, over the past nearly a decade. And it's exactly what we wanted. We wanted to disintermediate the intermediaries. And like, this is case in point. It's being accomplished before our eyes. And that's pretty incredible. So I think that was incredibly interesting. And all they can really do now is say, well, how do we use this? What do we need to do to use this? And yet they're terrified of passing laws that are crypto-friendly because the eyes of the world are on them, and they sort of feel like if they passed a bunch of crypto-friendly laws, that it would be like, well, this country that is like the origin of the Panama Papers, they're just doubling down now. They haven't learned from their lesson. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know if they're going to go the Malta route and become crypto-friendly, or if they're just going to buck against it because they don't have a choice. But it is interesting to see that the world is changing before our eyes because of this technology and because of the efforts of thousands of developers and community members all over the world that have worked on this for so long. Another interesting thing that happened was I went to the blockchain embassy in Panama, and I spoke to a lot of Venezuelans. And the situation in Venezuela is not great, but crypto has kind of like been a saving grace there. And so they have a Bitcoin ATM there, and then they have a Bitcoin ATM, several Bitcoin ATMs in Venezuela. And what's happening is like a grandmother will take $20 and she'll walk in there and she'll like put the $20 into the ATM and she'll get Bitcoin out, but she'll send it to her grandson's Bitcoin address, and he's in Venezuela. And he'll take that, now he's got Bitcoin, and he can go and convert that to bolivars on a daily basis, and there's food for like 3-4 days. The average, the cost of a Big Mac meal in Venezuela is 11.5 million bolivars, and the average salary is 5.5 million bolivars every month. So you can buy half a Big Mac every month. I mean, that's like not ideal. So I don't think you can live with that. I'm guessing, you know. I don't think I can live with that. Say it.
Does Big Mac coin fix that?
No, it does not. But it's you know, and of course, like that whole like petrodollar or whatever it is that they want to do is just that's another mess. That's not going to change anything. So cryptocurrencies are deeply rooted, or becoming deeply rooted in Venezuelan, just sort of the way of doing things, the way of living. People are now earning salaries in Bitcoin, in Monero, in Litecoin, in whatever, and that's really powerful. And I think that again, you know, it's what we wanted to accomplish all along, is provide something that is stable when the world around it is not. And so when people talk about like, oh, but look how volatile Bitcoin is, it's like, really? Look how volatile Bitcoin isn't in Venezuela. Look how volatile Bitcoin isn't when somebody has $10 million in an offshore account that they like are petrified of losing. However they got it, I don't know. Anyway, that was really interesting. And then of course, over the past few days, I've been at DEF CON. And for those that don't know, DEF CON is a hacker conference. It happens just after Black Hat. It's happened for over 2 decades. It predates Black Hat's existence. And Black Hat is kind of like consensus. It's a very sort of a sponsor-driven event. There's tons of vendors. All the major guys are there. Microsoft has a booth, and Microsoft has a party, you know, and they just like spend a ton of money, and there are a ton of suits, and you feel really icky walking in there. And then straight after Black Hat is 3 days of DEF CON, where like every single weird person that you've ever known in your life is sent to Vegas. And it's amazing. And all sorts of like crazy stuff happens. I mean, there's literally like anything that you could possibly want to do at DEF CON is available. There are people walking around in furry suits, the DEF CON Furry Club. You know, if you just want to sit and solder, there's a soldering village where you can literally just sit and solder like for 3 days. I mean, whatever you want to do. And then they just party. There are parties every single night, and it's all like self-assembling. So we threw a Monero party. It's the second year we threw a Monero party, and it's just a bunch of volunteers, and they just club together and they put some money together, and it's in a suite rather. It was in a suite at Caesars last year and this year. And last year we were in like this 2-bedroom suite. It was kind of nice, and we just like packed that suite out, and there were people standing in the line outside all the way down the hallway. And this year it was even worse because we had a 2-story 4-bedroom suite, and we packed that out. And there was a line downstairs at the elevator that stretched all the way back into the casino. And there were 6 elevators. So it was crazy. We guessed that there were around 1,500 people that came through. And it was great. And all the DJs that played are hackers. So it's not, not DJs that anyone knows unless you are like in the space. But they're like hackers who actually work in InfoSec at companies. What was really special this year is for the first time there was a Monero village. And villages are self-assembling, but you need to get approval to have a village. You can't just like pitch up and be like, oh, I'd like to have a whatever village. And DEF CON has for a very long time been very anti-cryptocurrencies. For a number of reasons. One of the big ones is because we use the term crypto, and hackers hate that because it's cryptography. And now they're like, oh, why are you using the term crypto? In fact, there's a crypto and privacy village at DEF CON. And especially over the past 3 or 4 years, they've been inundated with people walking in and being like, so is this like about Bitcoin? And they get super pissed off. So, I think what is actually, it is actually kind of nice because now people would walk in and be like, so is this about Bitcoin? And they can be like, no, go to the Monero village. Go. It's down the hallway. Get out. And that worked for them. So, but it was, I wasn't involved in the process of organizing the Monero village, so I have no clue how that managed to happen. Because last year, I had a chat to some of the organizers, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we did like a blockchain cryptocurrency village? And they're like, no. No, we are not doing that. That is not happening, like ever. So just to see that shift in attitude amongst security researchers, hackers, security professionals, who are now going like, okay, I see the value in this, not just the monetary value, I see the value in something that is tamper resistant, censorship resistant, and defends my privacy, my financial privacy. In fact, one of the remarks that was made during the closing ceremony is there's a whole vendor area, and there are only like 20 vendors, but they sell all sorts of things. So like Hack5 have got a booth there, and they have tools like the Wi-Fi Pineapple and that sort of thing. And all their tools are used for security research, but you can like buy something to tap into a LAN, and you can buy something called a rubber duck, which acts like a keyboard. It looks like a USB flash drive, but you plug it into a computer, and it just like churns out commands. And it's great for owning a computer. You just like walk past, plug it in, and go and collect it later. And it's gone and installed your backdoor, whatever you want. And there's other stuff. There's RFID scanners, and there's USB killers, where you plug a device into in between it and the charger, or just plug it straight into a device that's got native current, and it loads up a capacitor and dumps the voltage onto that device and fries it. These are tools only in lockpicks. I mean, there's just like every lockpick you could ever possibly want. And these are tools that you don't really want showing up on like your credit card statement. And I went and bought a bunch of stuff at Hacker Warehouse, and I was like, when my credit card company sees Hacker Warehouse showing up, they're gonna freak. And so a lot of people come with cash, and they come with wads of cash, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. And this is now their opportunity to buy the stuff in person in a way where their credit card company won't know what they're doing. Where Amazon's not going to like say, oh, hey, we see you bought some lockpicks. Would you like to buy some more lockpicks? You're totally not doing anything illegal. You're not breaking into houses. And they made this remark during the closing statement about how people go to the vendor village and they buy stuff there because they want to keep it off their credit card statement. They want to keep it off their Amazon history. And who knows? I don't know what's going to happen, but I think there might be scope. Maybe next year those vendors are going to accept Monero. And you know, I'll talk to them. I'll sort of try to put a bit of pressure on them. And hopefully next year it'll be even easier and people won't need to carry around wads of cash, which is of course terribly dangerous in Vegas, because you might come across a stripper and then next minute you have no cash. You don't have that problem with Monero. You can't be like, where's your QR code, baby? I mean, you can, but she probably doesn't have one. At any rate, it was really fascinating to see just the change in attitude, and I had dinner with two people that are on the CFP review board. So all the people that want to talk at DEF CON, they submit papers to the CFP review board. I was having dinner with them last night, and they were like, "Man, we've got to get Monero as a payment method for the vendor village next year." And I was like, that's something that we need to do. So there's a slow sort of acceptance amongst the people that really should have been our early adopters for Bitcoin and for Monero, but who have largely rejected it for a long time. But the one really cool thing, of course, is having the village. We had 3 days worth of talks. We had lines forming outside for the talks, DEF CON had 35,000 people there this year. So, you know, that's a significant number of people. We were in a very prominent place. We were right by the swag room, and one of the chill out areas. And people saw us. They saw the village. They came in. They got pamphlets. They learned about Monero. And next year we're going to do better. Next year we're thinking of, because we had a really cool Monero badge this year. Electronic badges are kind of a big deal in the InfoSec community. And we made a Monero village badge and a Monero badge. And the Monero badge was amazing. It had this big light up pixel LED screen, LED screen. And next year we're thinking, like, wouldn't it be cool if we could make a hardware wallet badge? And that's sort of, as with every year, badge life starts like the Wednesday after DEF CON ends, so that you can like get ready for the next year. We're starting that like tomorrow, Wednesday, because there's a ton of work to do, but I think it would be amazing. You know, we can do a run of like 500 badges, and we can get 500 hardware wallets into the hands of people who are curious, who are interested, and who will actually go and use it afterwards. I wanted to sort of just talk a little bit about what's been happening the past couple of weeks. And now I throw it open to questions. Who wants to ask stuff about Monero, about Tari, about anything? It's not back there.
Where do you see Monero in 2020?
Where do I see Monero in 2020? Let me see, my exit scan was 2023. So I guess that's pre-yacht. No, I don't know. I mean, 2020 is close, surprisingly close. I just want to see a little bit more mainstream acceptance of Monero as something that is useful for retaining people's privacy. I think that I'm deeply concerned that people are just largely apathetic to personal privacy. And we've seen it with Facebook, we've seen it with so many things. It's the effort that is required to use even the most basic privacy measures. People just ignore it. But I think that I hope that the tide is changing slowly, because I see things like VPNs just becoming, they're blown up. They are so popular. And everyone is just like, oh, I use a VPN. Why do you use a VPN? No, because, I don't want my ISP seeing what I'm doing. I don't want them blocking sites. VPNs aren't a fantastic solution, but it's a step in the right direction. It's easy for people to use. The speed is sufficiently high that I think the quality of the browsing experience isn't damaged too much. And I think if we can get Monero to that level where the experience of using Monero is not that dissimilar to using something like WePay or you know, in South Africa we have like SnapScan and Zapper, and it's just like there's a QR code. You scan the QR code with your phone, you confirm the amount, and off you go. And everyone loves it, everyone uses it. And similar services are all the rage in China. So if we can get that level of functionality, if we can have like the tap and pay stuff that Apple Pay has done so well, if we can have that level of functionality in the next 2, 3, 4 years, I think that'll make a big difference to people actually using Monero as a payment method, instead of just going like, oh, what's a Monero? And what does that even mean? Cool. Sure.
So I get a little nervous that if I do things and send things through tumblers and throw them through Monero, I think everything's okay. 5 years from now, feds curl back the freaking tin can, and all of a sudden everything I've ever done that I thought I was good at, not so good so much. So what is your perspective on the future of Monero outpacing the future of those that want to speak in?
Good question. I think that it's there's no fantastically nice answer to that. It's always gonna be a cat and mouse game. The reality is that it's already a cat and mouse game on data on the internet in general. So something that we've seen happening, that we have evidence of happening, is when you're browsing sites and you're posting stuff on forums and whatever you're doing, you're normally using a site that uses HTTPS, uses SSL, TLS, and you're like, cool, so my data is encrypted, it's end-to-end encrypted. And there are government agencies or whoever, we don't know who they are, but they're just like schnapping up all that data, and they are just storing it for data decryption. They might not be able to decrypt it now, but in 5 years' time, when they have a quantum computer that's sufficiently super powerful, they're just going to like, they'll just decrypt all of it, and then they're going to be like, oh, that's what you were posting. Oh, you're a crazy man 96. And that, that's like not great. Oh, you're a fluffy birdie. So I mean, but it's going to happen. And so, like, I guess the first thing is if you are doing something that is like outrightly illegal, you probably shouldn't be writing about it on the internet, and you probably shouldn't be using anything digital for it. You should be like meeting with the people buying your nuclear weapons in person. It just seems to be giving them diamonds or something, or very expensive watches. I think that's much better currency than anything that's over the internet, because anything that is digital, that is transmitted, that goes through all these intermediaries, it's getting schnapped up somewhere along the way, and if you're doing something that's that bad, well, you're going to be kind of screwed. And
not even that bad. I mean, things become illegal and illegal, like marijuana is federally, illegal, the state legal, to play fair commerce, which it appears as though there's a place to play fair commerce without federal intervention.
Absolutely. Look, I think that to some degree there's it's unrealistic for regulators to really go and penalize you for something that you did 5 years ago based on evidence that they possibly obtained pseudo-legally or using a quantum computer that no one's supposed to know exists or whatever. So we have that protection, and then of course there's statute of limitations and that sort of thing. So for the most part, I think they're largely going to be disinterested in all the information. And what I have definitely found, just in discussions with people who have been regulators in the past, and even like in Panama and so on, the discussions I had there, it seems to me that they are more concerned about things like terrorism. They're not concerned about, oh, Bob bought a little bit of weed on a dark market.
Tax evasion.
Tax evasion is a big one.
Yeah.
But I mean, there again, if you're using Monero for tax evasion, that's probably the wrong tool for the job.
Well said.
You probably need to go to Panama and chat to some of the people there. So I don't think that Monero is a vehicle that is particularly well designed for tax evasion. I'm certainly not a big proponent of tax. I don't think anyone is. I don't think anyone's going like, please carve out a piece of my salary, please do it. But it's using Monero to try and skirt that is not great. Unless you have a massive economy where you're getting paid in Monero and you're not really breaking out of it, then it becomes significantly harder. I'd love to see a scenario one day where regulators stop putting the burden of policing people's finances on financial institutions. Why should my bank be the one to think that I'm maybe doing something illegal and report me? How about if law enforcement agencies did their job and then they went and investigated me because they thought I was doing something suspicious, not because my bank thinks that I received $10,000 and isn't that hard. The onus should not be on financial institutions, and right now it is. We've had traceable money for 30 years. This is new. We have not had traceable money for 100 years. And over the past 30 years, law enforcement has just gotten super lazy. They're like, well, we can just rely on SAR reports coming in when someone deals with a lot of cash, and we can rely on this and that and the other, and we can just go and hit a button and query every bank in America, and that's what we're going to use instead of doing our job. And I think to a large degree the IRS has done the same. They've gone well, we used to do lifestyle audits, and we used to go well, this person's reporting $1,000 a month as their earning, but they have a Ferrari in the garage. And now they're just well, what we're doing instead is relying on banks to report stuff and relying on financial institutions to report stuff. And I mean, when was the last time anyone got a lifestyle audit? They're getting lazy and they're assuming their system of passive surveillance is sufficient. And that's the one thing that I'm dead against is passive surveillance. Surveil me because you are actively interested in me. Surveil me because you think I'm doing something wrong. Don't assume that everyone is possibly doing something wrong, and so we're going to surveil the whole world.
Got it.
Yes?
Kind of a follow-up on that question. It's actually kind of a follow-up on that question. It's kind of a personal question.
Sure.
Do you feel a little bit paranoid at times, given how public your face is in the space and what you do?
Yes and no. I think that I'm not a very good target for regulators. I mean, or for a government agency or whatever. I mean, if they take me out, they're just going to turn me into a martyr. That's not a good look. It's then suddenly Monero has a rallying cry. They killed Fluffy. we must get the government. I mean, that's really bad for them. So they won't do that. But yeah, I mean, of course, it's when I started working on Bitcoin, I was nervous, and when I started working on Monero, doubly so. And I had to sit down with my wife, and I had to have a frank discussion with her, and I'm like, this might end up with me being in prison. Are you okay with that? And she's like, nope. and I had to explain to her why I felt strongly about it, why I felt strongly about privacy is a basic human right, and why I am prepared to go to prison if that's what it takes. I think I'll buff up in prison, and I'll lose some weight, and I'll have a girlfriend, and it'll be interesting. And then I'll come out, and I'll put fit fatality to shame. Not that I want to go to prison, but I think that there's, if that's what happens, it is what happens, And I think that there's a reason, there's a significant portion of the Monero contributors who are pseudonymous, and some of them have got incredibly good OPSEC, and will absolutely not ever appear in person, and have spent a significant amount of time and effort defending their OPSEC and making sure that they're used for with every interaction that they have with the Monero code base or with the community. And so it is what it is. If something happens to me, it's not going to affect the Monero project in any way. I hope people will be a bit sad, but it's not going to stop Monero from continuing.
Yeah, man.
Yes.
To follow up on the crypto.
There's a microphone.
So what happens when it's time to change the signature algorithm for that blockchain?
The signature algorithm, so you in terms of EDDSA?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, with Monero has a hard fork or network-wide upgrade every 6 months. And part of that is because of the fact that upgrades are necessary. We are used to upgrading our security software. We're used to patching our operating system on a regular basis. And so we've got the culture in Monero. Every 6 months you're upgrading your software because you need better privacy tools and so on. And so if we ever feel that like EDDSA is a problem, if we feel like our elliptic curve is an issue, changing it would not be a problem. You know, we'd have at worst a 6-month lead, and you know, at best we'd be closer to a 4 point, and we'd be able to roll in and change, and off you go. So we're very interested in in post-quantum cryptography, at least I am. I had a discussion with a post-quantum cryptographer about a year and a half ago, and I was like, I'm concerned about this, like, should we be doing something? And he was like, sure, when quantum computers actually exist, you should totally do something. The problem is a lot of the post-quantum stuff is based on hypothesis, and until we actually have a working quantum computer with a sufficient number of qubits, we're guessing about how post-quantum cryptography will work. And I think there's nothing worse than expending a bunch of effort to switch to an algorithm or to switch to a signature scheme, which then ends up breaking, under an ordinary GPU, and it still isn't strong in a post-quantum world. So we've got to take a wait and see attitude with that.
So global warming is a good thing, right?
Global warming is an interesting thing, but of course it doesn't exist, as we know. All right. Yes.
What kind of things can we see in the next R4 plus kind of new development?
Sure. So the next hard fork is October, called network upgrade is what we're calling it. And I think a couple of things. Probably, I'm hoping that Bulletproofs will go live. Bulletproofs has been live on testnet since December, but we're in the middle of several audits that the community has funded. I haven't really been involved in that, so I've seen the outcome of 2 of the audits, and I believe there's a 3rd one that's pending. And if we get that wrapped up in the next, 4 to 6 weeks, and that audit comes back clean, or we patch whatever things that audit finds, then I see no reason for Bulletproofs not to go live in October. And that's a massive reduction in Monero transaction sizes by sort of 80–85%, and then it means that the minimum ring size can be increased probably to like 10. So those are the sort of things that I'd be looking at, that I'm looking at, what I'd be expecting to go into the October hard fork.
How about the Kryptonite V8?
Yeah. I mean, obviously the Kryptonite V8 change as well. I think there's a pull request that's open for it at the moment, or there's a bunch of discussion over it. And yeah, the V8 change. I mean, we're just going to keep changing every 6 months for now. We need to sort of feel it out and see how it goes. I'd love to switch to an ASIC when an ASIC is commoditized, and we're not there yet. It's, in my mind, a commoditized ASIC is the same as a USB flash drive. USB flash drives are cheap, you can get them almost anywhere, and when you go to a conference, they throw them in your swag bag. So, I want to be able to go to a conference and get an ASIC thrown in my swag bag. I mean, that's commoditized. And right now, we're not even close to that. So, maybe we need to stave it off for another few years. There's no such thing as permanent ASIC resistance, but we can at least push back against Bitmain and against ASICs for a period of time until we can switch to something that is more commoditized.
Just on that topic too, how about FPGAs? Are you seeing that starting to affect the network?
So FPGAs are interesting. There hasn't been a big uptick in hash rate that isn't commensurate with either the general sort of growth in hash rate or with a drop in hash rate on another coin that's GPU mineable. But there are FPGAs out there, and they're expensive. They're not cheap. So the barrier to entry is quite high. And the other thing is there's constraints with an FPGA, like they have a set amount of memory. And so it's relatively trivial for a Kryptonite V9 or V10 change to just be like, well, you know, now we need more memory than those FPGAs have. And now they're useless. So it's definitely, FPGAs can adapt to some degree, but they're not perfectly adaptable. There's also some interesting research being done with highly generalized programs running as a proof of work and a proof of work function, and that might provide an answer, because that will not perform well in an FPGA at all. It would have to constantly be reprogrammed. So anyway, I mean, there's lots of interesting stuff. That's lots of interesting research that's going on. FPGAs are not something that I'm massively concerned about.
Thank you.
Cool. Sure.
Hey, first man, thank you for your service, community.
Thank you.
So two questions. One is, speaking of Panama, it's kind of struck my interest in terms of you travel the world, you talk about Monero. Any areas in the world that you see growth of Monero that's might be out of the norm? And then the second question is, you're here in the city, anything we should be expecting out of Coinbase coming soon?
Okay, so let me get to the Coinbase question first. Look, Coinbase loves Monero. We had two Coinbase employees speaking at the Monero Village DevCon. One of them gave a keynote, and the other one was on a panel with him. So there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt that Monero is deeply respected there and widely liked. I don't think that we have an answer for the regulatory difficulties yet. I certainly haven't heard anything. No one from Coinbase is talking to me. You know, like, I don't have Brian on speed dial. Stop trading now. I can't do anything like that. And if it does happen in the future, then I assume that maybe one of them will let us know, and maybe they won't. I mean, we've had exchanges that have added Monero, and we don't get wind of it. Like, suddenly there's an announcement, and it's like, oh, good, for next added Monero, okay. And there's been other times when they've spoken to me beforehand, or they've spoken to someone else beforehand, and we just keep quiet about it. It's, you know, and we just stay off exchanges for the entire period leading up to it, just to keep our nose clean. And yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anything about Coinbase. I think if it does happen, it'll be a while, and it'll be commensurate with a regulatory framework that works with Coinbase. In terms of where I see Monero adoption, I think that Africa and South America are big hotspots. There are challenges there that are just not really challenges in the rest of the world. As an example, there's a company in Colombia. They're owned by a Canadian mining company, and I mean like actual mining, not cryptocurrency mining. I mean like digging in the ground. And they've acquired mining rights on this land where they think there's gold. And now they have to like drop shafts in to find if there is actually gold. And this is like a 6 to 12 month process. And so this Canadian company that owns the sub, they're like, cool, how much is it going to cost $10 million for us to dig all these shafts? Cool. Now they can't go and put $10 million in a bank account in Colombia, because if they do that, then the people that have access to the bank account will be kidnapped. So what they have to do is the day before payday, they wire money into the account, and then all the payments are done and the account's empty. And that is like I mean, can you imagine needing to do that in the United States? It's like not a thing that you don't walk around going like, oh my God, I have more than $1,000 on my credit card, I might be kidnapped. You know, it's not a concern that we have. Even in South Africa, it's not a concern. But it's a big South American concern. And I think that there is massive scope for Monero playing a part with something like that, where nobody knows how much you've got. Nobody knows if you have any at all. And no one can leak that information that you have some. And that's really powerful. And the same goes for Africa, where there are a lot of disenfranchised people. There are a lot of people who are unbanked because they choose to be unbanked, because they are concerned about the information leakage that happens when they become banked. And I think that there's scope for Monero to play there as well. But this is, right now we've got a usability problem. And we've got to fix that before we can even hope to be picked up in any meaningful fashion.
What's the plan for that?
So, I mean, the great thing about an open source project is there's rarely a plan.
What's your hope for that?
There are a lot of people doing cool stuff. Paul at Monero is spending a lot of time on improving usability. I had a chat to the GUI guys, some of the GUI guys that were at DEF CON, and a really interesting thing happened in Panama. I gave an intro to blockchain talk, an intro to cryptocurrency talk, to like 30, 40 people, bankers, regulators, a whole bunch of them. And I'm like 10 minutes into the talk, and it's very basic stuff, and I'm like using lots of analogies and I'm explaining things, and I think it's going really well. I mean, it was going really well, and this one dude sticks up his hand and he's like, "I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what is an address?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, what's an address? Like, do you mean like, is it your home address, or is it like your email address?" And I was like, this is a term that we use all the time. It's like, this is my Monero address, send it to my Bitcoin address. And people have no clue. They even in their mind, they're like, well, I don't know, what is this long string of numbers? And so we've got to do better. And we're not going to change the terminology. We've gone down that road, we've tried to change terminology, it never works. The terminology we're stuck with it. So how do we, when somebody fires up the Monero GUI for the first time, how do we walk them through this? How do we explain to them what an address is? How do we translate the terms that have to be there because they're terms that are common to terms that the person will understand? And it's a challenge. But I think that we're up for it, and I think there are a lot of people that are going to be playing around over the next sort of 12 months, and with specific focus on that, on seeing how we can make improvements, especially to the first time that someone hits a screen, and they go, "I have no idea what this means." Same goes for the website. We take for granted how many technical terms there are on the front page of the website, and we need to do better. And I think part of it is that we're dog-fooding in many ways. We're using the website ourselves, we're using all the tools, but we're not speaking to new people that are using it. And that's something that needs to change. We're not speaking to newcomers enough. And when we start doing that, then we'll have a forcing function. And this is something, by the way, that anyone can do. This is not a developer thing. Go and take any Monero wallet and go and find someone, take a friend of yours that is not into crypto, and say to them, I will give you whatever, $10 a Monero if you can figure out how to use the Monero wallet. And then sit with them and see what happens. And the pain points, the stuff that they're struggling with, go to the Monero GUI repo and just open issues and just be like, on GitHub, and just be like, yeah, this is a problem, that's a problem, this needs to change. And then we can actually start addressing them. Because right now we've got no feedback loop, we've got no information coming back in, and we're just using it and going, "Oh my God, how cool is that? Oh, like you click on that thing and it does this. Oh, you click on that and the view key. Oh wow, it's so cool." And meanwhile, people are like, "What's a view key?" So yeah, we'll get there, but it's iterative and it's going to take time. Yes.
Speaking of usability, usability, I have two questions. Number one, is it possible?
It's all
Is it possible to use Monero without downloading the whole 20 gig blockchain?
Yes, it is. So if there's several ways of doing so. There's one where you use a remote node, and there's one where you offload the scanning of the transactions to a service. and all of the mobile wallets use this. So if you use Monero on Android, or Monero, or X Wallet, or Cake Wallet, all of those use one of those mechanisms or the other, and none of them download 20 gigs of blockchain.
To me, I read about that, and it was like, oh, you gotta set up all this proxy server settings and.
It's other people are running. Yeah, I know. Other people are running volunteer stuff, so you don't need to.
Okay, I still don't need to know the implications. Like, is that gonna reveal how much money I'm putting in and out of it? Is that gonna?
There's some privacy trade-offs, but there's a lot of work that's been done to try and reduce the impact of that. Using a remote mode is definitely the lesser of two evils. Obviously, it's like with anything. If you want maximal security and maximal privacy, build your own computer, like from the silicon up, which is infeasible. So now we're reliant on like Intel and Samsung and whatever, and that's fine. You know, like maybe they put stuff in the chips that we don't know about, and we're not going to roll our own silicon. And somebody who just wants to make like a couple of Monero payments and play around with it is not going to run their own backend, and they're probably not going to run their own full node. So it's, you know, the privacy trade-offs are relatively small, and at the end of the day, the most of the inferences that can be made still don't really help that backend provider from having any sort of informational suck that they can just be like, here's a database of all your transactions. That's not possible.
Another thing. You know about Jack's wallet?
Yes.
Why do they have so much trouble integrating your currency, integrating Monero into it?
Good question. So Monero is not based on Bitcoin's code. It has not a single line of Bitcoin's code in it, and that means that everything is new. And it means that a lot of stuff has to be redone from scratch. And so the amount of effort for Jax to integrate it would have been quite high, and they just did not have the technical competency to do so. On the other hand, Edge wallets have no problem integrating Monero. So, you know, multi-currency wallets can integrate Monero, they just need to have a degree of technical competency that Jax lacked.
Didn't Jax integrate a bunch of other currencies that are not based on Bitcoin?
For the most part, Jack, if you have like an easy JavaScript library, which Ethereum has, for example, then Jax can slap something together. And Monero did not have at the time an easy client-side JavaScript library. We have one now, but even that requires some back-end work, which they still lack the technical competency for.
Okay, I'm just saying, like, if these smart people who built this thing lack competency, is that a problem on their part? Or, like, if it was easier to integrate Monero into other programs and apps, would there be a bigger chance that someone somewhere will come up with something that's easy to use
Yeah, look, I mean, I think this is a very specific, Jax is a very specific situation. I would definitely not recommend that anyone use Jax ever under any circumstances. They store your private seed unencrypted in memory. A researcher brought this to light, and the way they treated him was not acceptable. A researcher brought the fact that they store your private key unencrypted in memory to light, and they did not handle it well. They treated the researcher extremely poorly. And that, I think, speaks volumes for them not being a security-focused organization. And if you are, you're relying on a wallet to securely store your funds, and if they are not security-focused, then you're going to have a bad time.
Thanks for the advice. I'll keep that in mind. What did you say to use instead?
Edge.
Never heard of it.
Edge used to be Airbits. It used to be Airbits, and it got rebranded to Edge. Or it was, it's the same company, but it's their new version, and it's just called Edge Wallet.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Yes, in the back.
I promise I'll be quick. What's your take on the currency hardware wallets? That's the first one.
Cool. current state of hardware wallets is looking pretty good. Casisto, which is the one that the Monero hardware guys put together, it works really well. There's a lack of production grade Casisto units, but it's all open source, so like anyone can go do a production run and like sell them. Just not many people have been motivated to. But that works. Ledger Nano S works with Monero quite well. And Trezor say Model T, that's coming with Monero support. And Digital Bitbox are working on it as well.
The second question is, do you personally peruse the Reddit subreddit for Monero? And if yes, how often?
So I check the Monero subreddit probably every 2 or 3 days. I don't really get past the front page. So anything that's buried beyond that, I'm probably gonna miss. But I mean, if people tag me, I read the comment that they tag me in.
The final question I have is actually just more a philosophical question. I'm definitely a believer and fan, but what do you think about our societies at large that we need this kind of technology to defend ourselves? What does that say about our societies?
So I think that what it says about our society is that there are a lot of people that are just trying to build cool stuff, and that the cool stuff that they build ends up getting abused. And I think probably the best example we have of that right now is Facebook. Facebook is not a platform that any Facebook developer who's ever worked in it, I don't think any of them thought it could be abused, at least not to the level that it has been. Facebook has been entirely weaponized as a way of steering and directing the conversation using means that are outside of Facebook's control, using civil attacks that are virtually undetectable by Facebook, and because they've got real people behind them. And for a technology as benign as Facebook to be weaponized, I think that it is, it's shocking to us, but it also just shows that when we are working on technology, and I think this is important in the Bay Area where there are so many startups, we need to think very, very carefully about what happens when our technology gets abused. And what happens when someone sticks someone else's hand in a juicero? These are the questions that we need to be asking.
I think a lot of these technologies are either crushed or co-opted.
Yeah.
In the sense of Facebook, they were definitely co-opted. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping that Monero is crushed, because I don't think co-opting is going to be an option.
Yeah, co-opting is not an option, but let's hope it's not crushed. Cool.
My question is, what role is the payment processor Globy playing in the adoption of Monero?
So Globy is, I think, just because of the way we built the team, and the fact that like Globy runs the Monero meetup in Johannesburg every month, and the fact that everyone on the team is a massive Monero fan, they're very incentivized to push Monero as a payment method. So every new merchant that comes on board, we sort of like try and encourage them to either accept Monero as the only currency or as a default. We've sort of been pushing Bitcoin Lightning the same way because I think that it provides a much better experience than paying with Bitcoin, at least for small invoices. But one thing that Globy does do is it acts as a funnel. So we accept a bunch of different cryptocurrencies, but we only allow settlements in Bitcoin and Monero. And so, if you want to pay with like scam coin number 7, no problem. Like we'll add scam coin number 7 to Globy. We'll even possibly, I don't know, maybe add Verge. But we're definitely not going to add Verge as a settlement method. It's going to funnel through and it's just going to go from Verge to Bitcoin or to Monero. Yes.
Hi. Thank you again for what you do. I wanted to go home tonight and either fork a repo.
Me too.
Yeah. I want to
Get it.
And I want to go home tonight and fork a repo that's languishing or contribute to a project that you think improves usability and self-custody, which is important to me. Like, what are some, I know you can't support any particular implementation, but what projects do you like, either, particularly when it comes to raw technology, that I've done tonight on, and maybe just either contribute to, support, or improve, some of our product we need to go into.
Sure. So I think it depends entirely on your skill set. If you're happy digging around with Qt and C++, then the official Monero GUI needs a lot of love. And if you are, if you'd rather play with like JavaScript and Swift, then the MyMonero apps are all open source and they're extremely usable already, but they could definitely do with usability improvements.
I mean, I also do.
Okay, then there's a Swift Swift native iOS app on the MyMonero repo, and it's in the App Store as well, so you can download it right now and get a feel for it. And it's not bad, but I think given how especially if you're not familiar with Monero, like download the MyMonero app and try use it, and you'll see the pain points. The fact that you have to create like an entire receive thing just to get the QR code. You'll definitely get a sense for like this can be done better. Cool.
If you could choose one, would you rather Monero be an expensive coin, a cheap coin, or a stable coin? Choose one.
This is like bang, marry, kill. Well, I banned Bitcoin and married Tether. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, like, you can buy a fraction of a Monero. So if Monero is expensive, but you're buying a fraction of Monero at a reasonable price, I guess it doesn't really matter. And if Monero is cheap, then it doesn't really matter either. I think liquidity matters more than price. So that there's sufficient market movement that people can go in and out without sticking out like a sore thumb. In an illiquid market, then anyone who's buying more than like $20 sticks out. So liquidity for me would be far more important than price. Cool. Yes.
Hopefully an easy enough hard question. What do you think? We talked about privacy as a vector for adoption, and you expressed some concerns about the public's aptitude for understanding that it needs privacy. What are your thoughts on fungibility filling that role alternatively, like fungibility instead of privacy as a reason Monero gets more attention? And then the other question is, which magical crypto friend is most annoying?
Samson, do you have a strong opinion on which magical crypto friend is most annoying? Well banned is fine.
Well, who do you choose?
We're all equally annoying. Samson's always late. I mean, there's that, To speak to your first question, people can barely understand the need for privacy. I really don't think we're going to convince them or make them understand the need for fungibility. I mean, we can put the fun in fungibility all we want, and people are still not going to understand it. I think that's kind of a lost cause. Like, I beat the fungibility drum, and people just look at me weirdly, and I'm like, fungibility, so important. And they're like, what? You want mushrooms with your dinner? So yeah, I think that's unfortunately not it's a tactic that might work with economists and financial people, but like Bob Soap, who's like insisting on still using Facebook so you can play Farmville, is not going to care about fungibility or privacy. Cool. All right.
One last tough
Sure.
question. You care about privacy, that's why you use Monero, right?
Yes.
So why are you using Coinbase?
I don't use Coinbase. It doesn't even work in South Africa. I'm spared the use of Coinbase. I do use local Monero, and I use local Bitcoins as well. I'm a big fan of local Monero and local Bitcoins. I think that peer-to-peer trades are underrated. And I've been using BitSquare as much as I can, sampled BISC. And I think those are the tools that we should be using. And yes, occasionally I do have to use Binance. But I mean, like, there's nothing you can do about that. Cool. Last question.
So price doesn't matter. I think maybe from a user experience point of view, it does. Saying like, oh, these coins are worth $5,000 each, and everyone's paying each other, oh, 0.003. Oh, you mean 0.0003? Like,
I agree with you.
People have, it's easier to understand a bunch of little things than like tiny fractions of a big thing.
Yeah. Look, to a large degree, I think that just becomes a units thing, a units change. So we've seen that with Bitcoin, where there's been a push to change to bits, or to change to maybe even a smaller unit. Bits seems to be relatively natural because then you still have 2 decimal places beyond that. And I would imagine that if Monero was sufficiently expensive, that would be something that the community would push for.
Have bits and millibitcoins really caught on, or is it just a few geeks who trying to promote it and everyone else is like, I don't know what this means. It's a 1 or a 0, right?
Bits has been the default in Red Wallet and in some other things for quite a while. I mean, yeah, certainly. Red Wallet.
Oh,
It certainly varies, but I think that it would be better if we could convince everyone to change the unit of measure. But if we were able to do that, we would just be a centralized scam coin like everyone else. So you know, we're not going to convince everyone in the Bitcoin ecosystem to change, but we can try and provide some pressure.
Make it like Tether, it should be exactly $1 all the time. Just come out of nowhere.
No hodling ever. Cool. Thanks very much, guys.
Not every day is a fucking perfect year, right? This is a real treat. Thank you so much, Rick. And that last thing, we're not a spin point? I'm pretty sure we were, I thought.
Only 2023.
Oh, sorry, only 2023. Great. Awesome. So again, I want to give a thank you to Starfish for letting us use your lovely space. Thank you, Starfish. Thank you, Charlie Labs, for the delicious pizza and beer. There'll be more beer afterwards. If you guys like tonight, who here like tonight?
I did.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. If you like tonight, we're here looking for more people to volunteer and help us make more Monero events like this happen in the future. If you would like to do that, come find me afterwards and find out how you can help make more Monero events. Cool. All right. Thank you all so much. Come back. Have a good night.